The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Hey everybody, and welcome to All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you live on, what day is today? 15th of April. It used to be the day that you would have to pay your taxes, but since I come to you in the age of the coronavirus, your tax payment has been postponed for 3 months. Anyway, here we are. I am in the state of New York, and I'm in the state, just in general, because I think everybody is. You know, we've been locked down here for a month. And I heard somebody say today, although I've heard it before, that they call it the COVID-19 because you gain 19 pounds during this thing. I come to you as I do often on these Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. here on Armed Radio. And I have constructed, if you will, myself a cocktail. I encourage people to sit down with a glass of whatever it is that you enjoy for tonight's podcast, and I'm coming back on a theme that I started last week. Normally on the show, if you listen, I talk about food. I talk about food, whether it's out in a restaurant, whether it's on a culinary journey somewhere around the world, whether it's something that we make, whether it's something that I can recommend, whether it's something that we shop for. Yet last week was different because I had seen this thing going around Facebook where, you know, you were asked to kind of like list 5 or 6 celebrities, one of whom you never actually met, 5 who you did. Somebody was supposed to guess. It occurred to me at that point that I had met so many celebrities that I didn't even know how to play the game. So I figured I would just podcast about it, because at that point I thought I'm pretty sure that I've met 60. I had recalled meeting 60 celebrities. And then here we are a week later, and some more came to mind. I am at number 77 I've actually got, but I wasn't able to go through them all last week, so I figured I would just continue with the ones that I didn't get to. Last week I told little stories about the celebrities that I had met, and that included Willis Reed, the basketball player, Muhammad Ali, the great boxer, one of the, the original kind of greatest of all time, Kenny Loggins and Charlie Daniels, James Taylor, Jackson Brown. Talked about smoking weed with Harry Reams, the porn star of the movie Deep Throat. Met Luther Vandross, recorded commercials with Tony Randall and Jack Klugman, the Odd Couple, and Alan Arkin met him too. Pele, also one of the greatest of all time in his sport of soccer, or football, as they say down there. Jackie Joyner Kersee, or gold medal winner. Dave Winfield, Hall of Fame, I believe Hall of Fame, but certainly a great Yankee player. Peter Ustinov and Victor Borger, old school kind of, talent, movies, television, etc., etc. Gerd Channing, Broadway star, went hiking with her. Spent plenty of time with Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. Actually vacationed with Gene Siskel. He was a buddy. Bob Costas. Met Billy Porter, Broadway superstar. Joel Grey, you may remember him. He was not happy with me. I told that story about how many times I had seen Dirty Dancing, the movie starring his daughter. And his response to that was just to look at me and then just walk away in disgust. Steve Madden, Mr. Shoeman. Oh, yeah, knew him. From the world of television broadcast news, Chris Matthews, met him. Chuck Scarborough. John Rowland was a guy that was big in New York television on the news for so many years. Jim Gaffigan, the great comedian, started around the same time I did in stand-up comedy. He was a month ahead of me, so he introduced me to my very first gig at the Improv in New York City. Ruben Blades, I know. as big as it gets in the world of Latin music, but also in television and in movies and overall. He was the Minister of Culture in Panama. That man has done open blades. And Jamie Lynn Sigler met over at the Aspen Food and Wine Festival. She was mezzo-soprano there in, Sopranos, of course, and shook the hand and congratulated Mr. Mayor, Michael Bloomberg, some years ago. So those are the 30 stories that I mentioned, obviously in more detail, last week when we did this show. That was episode number 77. You're listening to episode number 78. Should you want to, however, at any point in time, pop back in and hear, if you did not, my encounter with celebrity, those 30 particular celebrities. You can find the podcasts, not only what we do here live on Wednesday evenings at 8 o'clock, All You Can Eat, but rather archived soon after the show. If you went into iHeartRadio and you searched in podcasts for All You Can Eat or Rob Rosenthal, you would find last week's number 77, the first 30 celebrities that I had met. Now it turns out that I have another 4. And I would say, and a lot of the ones that I kind of kept for this week were people in the food world, because obviously I had a chance to meet a lot of food people. We'll talk about them. And suppose you didn't search in iHeartRadio, but instead went over to Spotify and searched podcasts there for All You Can Eat. You would find the show archived there as well. Now, before I get into the next series of celebrities with whom I had some encounter, some brief, some longer, some interviews, some chit-chat, some momentary, some lovely people, some not so much, I will tell you that in 1 week from tonight, rather than the usual podcast, you can join me live, online, where I will be giving a, what would you call it, a class, a lecture sounds a little bit dry and boring, a presentation, if you will, that I call 10 Herbs and Spices That Will Change Your Life. Now, the last time that I gave this presentation, I gave it in person to a crowd of people in New York City at the institution known as the 92nd Street Y. It's been there a very long time, and it's a serious and great cultural institution. I'm thrilled, in fact, that they not only invited me back, but said, hey, look, we're not doing any of these things in person right now, so why don't you do this thing online live? So what I'm going to tell you about next week is at 7 p.m. next Wednesday, 1 hour before this very podcast, I do 10 Herbs and Spices That Will Change Your Life, and it's a program that will come to you on the 92nd Street Y Zoom account, and you have to register in advance, obviously, so they can give you all the kind of login information. I think that the 92nd Street Y charges $15 to come in and participate, watch, hear what I have to say about herbs and spices that will change your life. There's two things that I think are important for me to say to you. That's their charge, and I understand it. They charge for classes. It has nothing to do with me. I'm going to tell you I think it's worth it. I'm going to tell you I think it's worth it because I think especially when you're kind of locked in at home for a month at a time, I imagine people are getting a little bit sick and tired of what they got left in the, left in the cupboard and in the freezer at this point. They must be just getting bored to tears. And by the way, even in good times, I mean, even if you were able to go out all the time, I think people have a tendency to cook and eat the same thing over and over all the time. And that's okay. It's not, hey, look, I roast the chicken every single week of my life. What I do try to do, however, is I do try to vary the flavor. So one of the ways that you can do that, in fact, my contention is the best way that you can do that is to flavor the bird differently. Flavor your chicken or anything, any protein, any vegetable, anything that you cook can be not only changed, but changed to make it more fascinating, more delicious, more spicy, more savory, more name it. I wrote a cookbook. It's called Short Order Dad. You can find it wherever you want. But here's the point. I wrote the book with the premise that my whole desire in cooking is to get the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort. It's literally like lazy. If I can cook something with 2 ingredients, life is freaking good. And I can tell you how to. And here's the thing. The easiest and most productive and most effective way to get different flavor from what you're eating is through herbs and spices. So I'm going to tell you that even if I offered you nothing other than an hour or an hour and a half or whatever that class runs on, these are 10 or 15, it's called 10 because that's a nice round number. I'm pretty sure there are going to be 17 different flavors that I'm going to refer to, all of which, by the way, are easy to get, right? Because, even if you don't go out to a store, you can push a couple of buttons and have herbs and spices sent to your home. So even if there were nothing else for me to offer than 17 different flavors that will change the way that you cook and the flavor of what it is that you eat, that would be good for $15, I would think. But further to that, I have a relationship with the place called thespicehouse.com. And in fact, thespicehouse.com, you can go now. You don't have to wait till next week. If when you order some herbs and spices from the Spice House and you're checking out and they say, what's your promo code? You go, what's the name of Rob's show? That's the promo code here. And there you go, 15% off. I'll tell you right now, by the way, they are 5 weeks generally on delay for a lot of their herbs and spices unless that is, you get what they call the flat pack. Right? So instead of sending it to you in glasses or containers or metal or whatever it is that they would send it in, when they package it flat in plastic, they're able to stick it in regular mail and get it out to you pretty soon. TheSpiceHouse.com, promo code all you can eat, 15% off for you. The class next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. But you're going to want to sign up for it. You go to www, as they say, 92y.org. 92y.org/event. And frankly, I don't know, it may be complicated to remember this all, but /event/10 herbs and spices, and the 10 and the herbs and the spices are all, I don't know, hyphenated. Anyway, go to 92y.org and search for 10 herbs and spices, and I will be there. And I will take you through flavors that will change the way that you eat, the way that you taste, and what you think about food, and that's going to be good. That's next Wednesday night. If you want to attempt to call in this evening, try 800-508-5431. I don't know. If the phone rings, we'll know that worked, and it should kind of redirect to me right here in the studio. 800-508-5431. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments, any whatever. That's the number, 800-508-5431. Herbs and Spices Change Your Life, 92y.org. So now let's segue, as they like to say, into a whole bunch more of the celebrities that I met. And I'll give you a little, background, context, a little something. And I'm not afraid to tell you the truth about these people. Have more experience, more time, more things to say about some than others. So last week, those were the 30, ending with Bloomberg. And now I start with, and there's no order to this. I'm not going to get to the food people just yet. These people here are people that I remembered, celebrities that I remembered having met that I didn't remember last week. Caroline Rhea, comedian from Montreal, Canada, Canadian-American, best known for when she was Hilda on the ABC show Sabrina and the Teenage Witch. Funny lady, younger sister of a woman who worked for me for many years. That's how I know Karen. Robin Leach. You have to be, I suppose, a certain age to know Robin Leach. But in his day, let's say it was the 80s, I don't know how much of it was in the 90s, there was the television show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Champagne Wishes and Caviar Dreams. And your host on that show, week in, week out, was Robin Leach. He was big. I mean, he was super well known. He would go to the homes of celebrities, and you would have a chance to see how the rich live. I met Robin because as I was about to graduate from cooking school, after, I don't know, 600 hours of whatever, work, training, and time, they said, okay, well, you don't actually get your degree until you do what they called an externship. I didn't know the difference, and I still don't, between externship. I had to go somewhere and work, and most of the people in cooking school took jobs working at a restaurant, which made total sense because they were training us to be able to cook. I, however, at that point was still working for a big advertising agency. I wasn't in a position where I could go be working at a restaurant. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm interested in kind of the whole, production, broadcast, TV, radio thing. And they said, well, there's this new, because it was like early 90s, more or less, or mid 90s, early 90s. And they said, well, there's this new operation. It's known as the Television Food Network at the time. And, maybe you could go, do some work over there. And I said, well, that would be fantastic. I mean, that's like so right up my alley. And the thing that was even better about it was a block or two from where my office was at the time. And so the deal was, well, even before the deal, I had to go interview for the job. I interviewed with a guy named Joe Langen. He was one of the guys that came up with the concept of having a food network at that time. And in the interview, which went super well, here's what I can tell you happened. He had a guy on the network who I had been watching. His name was Emeril Lagasse. Nobody had heard of him really at the time because the Food Network was brand new. And he said, have you been watching any of the network? I said, sure, I have. And he said, what do you think? And I go, well, I said, this guy Emeril, and I was about to say, by the way, I think this guy's unbelievable. I loved, his energy. And even before I could spit that out, Langen said to me, yeah, we got to figure out a way to calm him down. We got to figure out a way to calm him down. Langen could not have been, he was right about the network, but he could not have been more wrong about Emeril, who then went on to become, went on to become the biggest single star, really kind of put that network on the map. Bam! Emeril Lagasse, I mean, he was unbelievable on that network. But I got the job, and the job was, I was going to be an intern on a particular show. And the show was called Cooking Live. It was at 10 o'clock every night, and it ran live across the Food Network. And it was good for me because I didn't have to get there until 6 o'clock at night. So literally I would walk out of my office at 6 o'clock, walk a couple of blocks over to the Food Network, and I would work on the show in the Food Network kitchen, preparing the food segment for the show. So every night at 10 o'clock live, the show stars, who else? Robin Leach. And Robin Leach has a co-host, and her name was Kate. I can't remember Kate's last name. But Robin was huge, so he was the guy really that kind of also, together with Emeril, I mean, he kind of, he put that whole thing on the map because he had celebrity friends. And so, and of the hour-long show, which ran live, 7 minutes was set aside to do some type of cooking segment. And my job in the kitchen was to help get that segment up and running, prepare the food, prepare the dishes, prepare the actor, prepare whoever was coming in. My boss was a young woman whose name was Joan, and when I started, two things are notable. I was coming from the office, and in those days, you would wear a shirt and a tie and a jacket, so I came over with and she said, okay, this is very exciting. She said, after I had been there for a couple of days, whatever, you're going to meet Robin today. Robin's coming in today. He's coming in from a long international flight, and so this is the day I'm going to meet probably my first day on the job, whatever it is. And so Joan, she says to me, Robin's going to come in. And so I get there, but before I actually saw Robin, I heard him. Because he yelled out her name, and he said, "Get me cold medicine. I have a terrible cold." And he had a British accent, and he was super congested. And he was yelling at her to even before you could see him, to go get him cold medicine and hot tea. He turns the corner, and I'm hearing this stuffy voice, because he's still talking the whole way, and he's dressed head to toe in purple. I don't mean just his suit. His shirt was purple, his tie was purple, his socks were purple, his shoes were purple, and he sounds congested, deeply congested, just coming off a plane with an accent. And I swear to you, all I could think of was the cartoon character Barney. That's who I was looking at. I was looking at Barney. He sounded like Barney, all congested and stuffed up. He looked like Barney, giant purple fat from head to toe. And she says, I want you to meet our new intern, Rob. And he looked at me. He took one look at me and he said, without even hesitating, awfully old for an intern. Which, of course, was the truth because, I wasn't in my 20s. I was already in my 30s. And that was kind of the end of that exchange. And then, like a day or two later, I passed him in the hall. And he said, oh, they told me. And I go, what? He goes, they told me what you do. I'm very impressed. Anyway, that was Robin Leach, who, yes, by that point, that I actually had another life outside of showing up there on the set. But yeah, he was quite something. Michael Strahan, a big-time player for the New York Giants. I got in an elevator at the Soho House down in New York, and people were having a conversation about a movie. I'm pretty sure the movie was Magic Mike. Oh, is it good? Yeah, it's good. Should I see it? And at some point, and then this voice from the back of the elevator said, yeah, you should see it. It's really good. And I look up, it's Michael Strahan. I said, okay, thanks. And I went to see the movie, not realizing Michael Strahan was in the movie. I met a guy named Gordon Elliott. I'm not sure that you could call him a celebrity unless you've been in New York for the last 40 years. You remember a guy on Channel 5, on whatever that was at the time, NEW, doing what they called door knock dinners. Literally, this big Australian guy, 6'6", would knock on a door, and he would say, he would literally break into people's houses, and he would cook whatever they had in the kitchen. Gordon Elliott. I met Daphne Oz very briefly, very pretty, the daughter of Dr. Oz. I met Allie McGraw, who happened to have been sitting in the lobby of the ad agency that I was working at the time, and I was walking through the lobby to go to another floor, and there is this woman who you just couldn't help but notice. Allie McGraw was kind of stunning, and it was something, she had a kind of a mystique or a magic about her. She had been in the movie Love Story, which was enormously famous with Ryan O'Neal. Love means never having to say you're sorry. And there she is sitting for some reason in the reception area. The reason it turns out to be is because she was coming in for some type of audition. And I just stopped, and I don't know what possessed me, but I said, that smell, you smell amazing. Oh, thank you. That's very nice. I said, what is it? She said, my fragrance is Annick Goutal. I remember this, and I'm going back, I don't know what year. This could have been 30 years ago. And, I still remember to this day. She was wearing Annick Goutal. I said, oh, by the way, that jewelry. She said, yeah, I got that at Ylang Ylang on Madison Avenue. I went hiking with a lady named Stephanie Miller. Famous? I don't know. She's got a big-time radio show that broadcasts every day, I think from the West Coast. I met on more than one occasion and have spoken to and have interviewed and have communicated with a guy by the name of Seth Godin, who is famous certainly in the marketing world, author of 17 books, maybe 18 at this point, who even knows, maybe more. Met Jenna Wolfe, Tamron Hall, and Ann Curry, all NBC, actually. All NBC broadcast people. Jenna, Tamron, beautiful. Ann Curry, you remember the story with Ann Curry. I met her briefly. We worked out in the same gym, it turned out. She ended up going down in the whole thing with Matt Lauer. And I met also 2 times Jane Krakowski, who is a beautiful, vibrant actress from McBeal from 30 Rock. I mean, she's just great. Jane Krakowski. We share a mutual friend, so I think I met her twice. I met very briefly, and I say met, I mean sometimes you can. What is met? I mean, I consider it more than just that we passed. I mean, it was some interchange, and Tom Hanks is who I'm talking about. There was a screening for a movie that he was in. Talk about forgettable. I mean, this is the greatest actor, one of the most awarded actors in our generation. He did a movie called The Circle, which didn't go very far, and I think if you look it up, you'll see it's like 15. Anyway, there was an after party, and he showed up, and we passed each other, and I looked at him, and I said, I'm telling you, I've seen your work. You've got quite a future ahead of you. And I don't remember what his response, but because mine was a little bit, kind of, smart-assy, but I was trying to, just be cute. And he came back at me with something that was really, I don't remember what it was, so it's not a great story, but he was instantly had a very funny kind of, oh yeah, I said, yeah, something about, I know what it was. I said, this guy, the guy who starred in the movie, I said to him, which was him, this guy got some future. He said, yeah, in commercial work, something to that effect. Very funny. Tom. August Bush III, is he, would he be considered a celebrity? I don't think you can consider him a celebrity, but he's certainly in the world of corporate kind of leaders, people who are well known, was enormous, right? August Bush III, otherwise known as Three Sticks, they would call him out there in St. Louis. Ran the chairman, CEO, owner, boss, capo di tutti capi, Anheuser-Busch. For years, and maybe still to this day, the largest brewery in America. Tough son of a bitch. They held an event every year where each of the kind of brand managers, the people who were responsible for their different brands, Budweiser, Bud Light, whatever it was, would get up in front of August and a crowd of all the big executives in an auditorium. And it was, and then every year somebody would get fired. It was kind of like a corporate version of gladiators in the forum. And what happened here, though, was that we had produced some commercials. When I say we produced the commercials, we came up with the concepts, the ideas for commercials for the Eagle Snacks, which was mostly well known at that point for the honey roast peanuts, which I mentioned last week. Anyway, our job was to come up with some commercials. We did. The commercials that we came up with featured Tony Randall and Jack Klugman, otherwise known as the Odd Couple, television's Odd Couple. Super famous, well known, and we crafted these lovely commercials. And it turns out, for whatever reason, I'm the guy that's going to go take them out to present them. They had been approved up through the system, except he wanted. They said no, we're going to need August to approve the commercials, which was unusual, and it was also unusual that they would send some kid out there, meaning me, to go present one-on-one, face-to-face with August Bush in his office, which if I had known any better, should have been intimidating. Of course, it just should have been. I went out there with the storyboards, as they say, to St. Louis, Missouri, went into his office. It was just August and I presented him the 2 or 3 commercials featuring Tony Randall and Jack Klugman. He looked at me and he said, 3 questions. Okay. 1. Do these guys say quality? And I said, well, yeah, that's this is why we chose them. Big and neat and really, appreciative of quality. And the other guy represents kind of the everyman, right? So it's perfect for a potato chip. What's your next question? How well known are they? Does my target audience know who they are? Yeah, we've actually done the research, Mr. Bush, and their recognition is somewhere. And well known and well liked, more importantly, among your target audience. 3, are they gay? And I laugh because at that point, 1990 or whatever it was, you're in the beer business in the middle of the country. I mean, that was anathema. Gay would have been just like the worst sin for these people. Just that would have been unimaginable. So that's the origin of his question. I said, no, in fact, they're not. They both happen to be. Good. Okay, it's approved. August Bush III, Anheuser-Busch. I met very briefly Hoda Kotb, who you now see every morning on the ABC News. I was doing a little work out there in Central Park when Hoda came by for a run and said, "Oh, that's cool," what I was doing. I have met not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4, 5, 6 times. The great. Now I'm getting into the food people. The great. And I don't use that. Lightly. Now that I'm looking up and down this list, I got to be honest with you. It's like half of these people really are fantastic and special and lovely and warm and nice. And I'm in the food list here now. I mean, all the people that I have met, spoken with, interviewed, whatever, in the food business. And the first guy on the list is legendary. Jacques Pepin is the real deal. Now, if you watched any kind of food television over the last, 30 years, you would know Pepin, who had a show on public television. But this guy, I would say 35 years he was doing television. And I just want to be really clear about one thing. I have seen most everybody, because I used to watch food television, growing up as a kid. I've seen a lot of people do this. But there is no question that the greatest instructor, the greatest cooking teacher on television of all time is Jacques Pepin. Masterful. And masterful not only at kind of what it takes to be successful in a television venue, but because he literally was there to teach you how to do what he was doing. This wasn't just for show. This was not food candy. This was not a stupid competition show. This was like one man standing there going, this is how you make an omelet. This is how you roast. This is how you saute. This is how you slice an onion. 35 years. Now, the first time I met him, first time actually was at a book signing, but that was nothing. He just signed a book, so I have. But the first time I met him, I had a gig where I was going to the Aspen Food and Wine Festival, which even to this day is still kind of like the granddaddy of all the food festivals. It takes place in a beautiful setting of Aspen. It's in June. Everybody who's anybody comes to these things. It's really just a terrific event. Anyway, I had a job. I was going to go out there with a crew and produce a little video of the film festival that they could use in subsequent years to kind of market, promote, and otherwise sell sponsorships for the festival. And part of that job was, that I had access to all the celebrity chefs that were there so that I could interview them and put them on tape and put them on camera and then, turn that into whatever the promotional film would be. I met Pepin, sat down with him on a park bench in the town of Aspen, rolled the video camera, he and I, asked him some questions. Fascinating. You can still actually go on to YouTube and see the video that I did all those years ago. It has to be a decade ago. But I remember from it that he talked about coming to New York City and was shocked when he went into supermarkets and could see that, if he wanted mushrooms, he had to get them out of a can. He wasn't accustomed to that coming from where he did. But his story was great, super talented guy, and lovely, good to be with, good to sit and chat with. The thing that really struck me, and I never forgot, was Pepin was like a prodigy over there in France, and ended up at a very young age doing the cooking for Charles de Gaulle, who was I'm pretty sure it was de Gaulle. He was the personal chef to the French president, and when he decided he wanted to come and move to America, he was offered the job to be the personal chef to John F. Kennedy. I said, did you take the job? He said, no. I said, what'd you end up doing? He said, I went to go work for Howard Johnson's. Now, this made me laugh because growing up, Howard Johnson's was a hotel chain and restaurant chain, most famous for fried clams, which, there was always a picture of fried clams on the menu when you would go into a Howard Johnson's. I said, so wait a second, you had a choice of working for President Kennedy or for Howard or going to work for Howard Johnson's, and you chose Howard Johnson's. And he said, yes, I did. And he explained why. Because he wanted to learn. He had already worked for a president. Now he wanted to learn what it would take to mass produce meals at a high level and understand food science and all that kind of stuff. Great man. You could, if you go onto pretty sure on my YouTube, I'll have an interview with him. I've written about him also in the Huffington Post. I said he was the greatest thing that France ever sent us aside from the Statue of Liberty. There's an article in there. I never got more kind of feedback because people love the guy. And he's legendary, and he's great. I met the aforementioned Emeril Lagasse. That was a quick one. Over there at the Aspen Food and Wine Festival. Lovely. The pretty Giada De Laurentiis was there also in Aspen with her husband at the time, no longer her husband. Did an interview with her. Charming. What I recall was, my question to her was, if you were if you were stranded on a deserted island, what 5 ingredients or 3 ingredients, whatever it was, would you want to have with you? And she didn't even hesitate. She said chocolate, 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 and chocolate. Giada De Laurentiis. Bobby Flay. Let's see. Flay. The first time I met Flay, he came to the kitchen because he was going to be on the Food Network. It was the first time that he would ever be on television, which is amazing when you consider here we are 25 years later. He's still all over the Food Network. I was there for his first night. He came into the kitchen. We were preparing his segment. And as I said, the co-host to the show was a young lady named Kate Connolly, who was cute. Didn't really know too much, nothing. Knew nothing about food or cooking. She was the co-host to Robin Leach because her uncle ran the Food Network, quite simply. Flay took a liking to her. And when I say he took a liking to her, it was evidenced by the fact that soon after that meeting there, Bobby and Kate were married. She eventually had one of his children. They have a child together. And he eventually divorced her. By explaining to her that years later, he married a TV star, not a housewife. Bobby Flay, as the story goes. But I heard it from, the woman who I was working for over there. Joyce Ememy. I met Michael Simon. How many times did I meet Simon? More than once. We did a segment together, a TV segment together. I interviewed him. I thought he was fun. He was lively. He was a good guest. He, however, promised me from his food hall in Cleveland that they had the best jerky in the world. He was going to get me some. That was 5-6. Mario Batali, I met him a couple of times. The first one was at Aspen. The thing about Batali was not only that he was a great chef and successful in New York at his various restaurants, Poe and Babbo and all those other things. He was good television. That guy was doing some good, TV shows, different, bright, articulate, talented, interesting. Turned out not to be that kind of guy. Second time I met him was over at, what do you call that place over there? His Italian food hall. And I went in and I said, hey, let's get a selfie together. And I took a couple and it wasn't really working out. He just grabbed the camera and he took it because he knew how to do that better than I. Mario, gone and forgotten. Carla Hall ended up becoming kind of like a standout star at one of those seasons of Top Chef. Because Carla Hall, on camera and off camera, is the same. Charming, happy, likable, bubbly, effervescent. Caught her the first time on the street in front of a food truck because she was sampling some fried chicken or some such thing in preparation for opening up a fried chicken restaurant. She was wearing a pink bandana. I could see that they had some extra ones. She didn't know that I was coming, but I was with a film crew because I was doing a show there myself on the Daily Meal. I put on one of the bandanas. I said, can I interview you? By all means. It was getting close to Halloween, so I was doing a Halloween-themed episode. I said, what do you do for Halloween? She said, I give out pencils. I just laughed my ass off. I said, this Carla Hall is an amazing baker, and we're talking about Halloween. I said pencils. I can't think of anything worse than that. That was my moment with Carla Hall. Bless her, funny, nice, sweet lady. Ming Tsai, another one of those guys that you see on like the public television type of shows. Super bright and really amazing cook, and a good also on-camera teacher. Super makes it look easy. It's not, but met him over in Aspen. Funny dude, likable guy. On the other hand, there was Rick Bayless out of Chicago, who is famous in Chicago for a number of restaurants, Frontera Grill and all the different, I mean, super, as well kind of known in Mexican cuisine in the United States from as an American than anybody. I mean, he really was an expert on the subject, also all over television. Met him, he was not particularly pleasant. He was, it's okay to be all business, but you can be all business and be kind of a prick. You can be all business and be charming. He wasn't so charming. Nor was Wolfgang Puck, who I met and interviewed, but who has certainly gone on to make hundreds of millions of dollars, selling essentially. Met Tom Colicchio, the host of Now. I mean, in those days there was no Top Chef, but I met Colicchio and interviewed him also in Aspen. Colicchio is what you see what he is what you see. I mean, he's not like all warm and bubbly and charming, but I'll tell you what, you got to have a great respect for this guy. He's out there to make a difference. He says what he thinks, and I'm talking about outside of the show. The show is an unbelievable rocket-like phenomenon, incredible success in the history of food television. I don't think you're going to find a success that matches the success of Top Chef all these years later, and Colicchio is the head judge on that thing. And in spite of not coming across as being particularly warm or bubbly or friendly or funny, whatever, you know what? Super talented, highly successful chef, and more importantly, a voice, someone that speaks out, someone that says, hey, this is right, this isn't, this is what I think, and his causes are all, I mean, he's the real deal. You got to respect Tom Colicchio. Daniel Boulud, one of the super great chefs, met him. Did a little, met and interviewed Boulud. He was fine. Wally Dufresne had a place in New York, restaurant in New York, known as WD-50. He's been around, smart, successful. Marcus Samuelsson, I met more than one time. I was invited to Bermuda on a press trip because there was a reopening of, I believe it was the hotel in Hamilton. I forget the name of the hotel, Princess, whatever it was. And inside the hotel, they're going to open up a new restaurant, and it's going to be a Marcus Samuelsson restaurant, and Marcus is going to be there. And I thought, well, I'll take that trip. Sounds good to me, right? I just want to make sure that I can interview Marcus. And I felt pretty confident about it because they said, yeah, probably. But I also knew his PR guy. He was a buddy of mine. Well, I go down to Bermuda. I'm impressed with Bermuda, by the way. I don't remember exactly the time of year. I want to say May, but whatever. The weather was lovely. The water was warm and sparkling blue. The flight is a couple of hours, and the food that they're serving in the place is fantastic. I'm happy, and I tried not once, not twice, a half a dozen times to set aside some time with Marcus Samuelsson. He's got people on staff there. Yeah, I'm getting the runaround. He's not in any kind of anxious to, and I'm writing a story for the Daily Meal. I put in some more calls. I make some more effort. Eventually, after 3 days of trying, he agrees to sit down with me. And he's not, at this point, all that warm and friendly in the interview. In fact, I made the point of mentioning that it was quite difficult to. And he said, well, we're here now. Let's get to it. And we got to it. And here's what I can tell you. I asked him, as I do oftentimes when I meet with, like, real chef people, professional, chefs, cooks. I go, look, most taste, fewest ingredients, least effort. That's my deal. What's your thing? Like, what's your go-to if I give you that? And he goes, fish with berbere spice. Berbere? I said, what's that? So Marcus Samuelsson tells me about berbere, which is a spice blend from Ethiopia, which has, I don't know, a dozen different, things in it. Coriander, cumin, cinnamon, black pepper, red pepper, blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay, berbere, that sounds good. And I came back. I wrote the article. It was very positive, very pleasant. In fact, I had seen him more than one occasion after that. And then all of a sudden he was super nice, because I think what the problem was, I think the reason he didn't want to meet is because I now I recall, he had some stuff written about him in the press that he did not like. And so the press to him was potentially threatening. I was not. My review of his restaurant was lovely. My interview with him was terrific. And he turned me on to berbere, which I went to try. And to this day, I must say, I love that stuff. All you need to do is take berbere. This is why I say most taste, fewest ingredients, because if I add berbere to chicken wings, and I throw them in the oven on a high heat until they get all crispy, it's amazing food. The house smells great. And even though the berbere is one ingredient, in fact, it's like a dozen. Marcus Samuelsson. I met on more than one occasion Floyd Cardo's Celebrity. I mean, he won season 3 of Top Chef Celebrity, right? So, I mean, he in the food world, people knew Floyd. He also was the most prominent Indian chef in America. He died about 3 or 4 weeks ago, sadly, from the coronavirus. He and I did he became someone that I could, we had a good time when we were together, and we laughed and we chatted. I had him come up and do a little segment with me at the Daily Meal. We cooked together. It was really great. I said, hey, I got a book. Can you want to write something? And he did. And what he wrote about the book was clear to me that he actually read the book, which is great. Great guy. 59 years old, dead, coronavirus, sadly. His place in New York City, the original one that kind of made him super well known, was I met Adam Richman, who has made a career on television, eating and cooking and doing things in the food world. I said to him in a little bit of an interview, I said, if you had the choice I met Graham Kerr. That was like super exciting to me, because that he was my idol. And when I was a kid, there were the Three Stooges, and there was Superman, and there was Lucy, and there was the Yankees, and there was the Mets, and all that stuff. And then there was the Galloping Gourmet. And because this guy, Graham Kerr, for a couple of seasons anyway, would jump onto the set, open up a bottle of wine, cook an amazing French meal, invite someone up from the audience to share the meal with them, have a look on his face as he was eating his own food that was unforgettable, that was beyond. Loved this guy. Thought he was God's gift. That show was beyond popular. It was seen by hundreds of million people around the world. Graham Kerr was something happened. There was a car crash. There was I don't know, like a religious thing, because all of a sudden he stopped eating, he stopped drinking. No, he didn't stop eating, he stopped drinking. And he's a very super religious guy. And then, I met him. He came up. I was working over there at the Food Network. He came up. I said, you might, go to, I don't know, some questions, and that was that. And then years later, I was able to get in touch with him, because nobody had seen or heard doing an interview, which I have still not yet. Maybe I'll put that one up if I can find it and edit it. I spent an hour on the phone with Graham Kerr. Fascinating man. And a great man, and an unbelievable talent in that world. I met and interviewed recently Ferran Adrià, chef owner El Bulli Bulli in Spain. In its moment, perhaps the best restaurant in the world. I met and did some work with Andrew Zimmern, who was enormous in the world of the travel network. That guy's got a great life story. I mean, well, that guy's got a life story that's unbelievable. I mean, heroin addict, homeless on the streets of New York. He is huge, Andrew Zimmern, in the world of food. Still to this day, he's got a show running right now, I think, on MSNBC. Anyway, I did some. I asked if he would help in doing some kind of public service advertising that we were doing at the time, and he did. So he was terrific. Jose Andres I met. That was a quick one, but fun. I was walking up the street to a party at my friend's house, and my friend was also a friend with Jose Andres. But it wasn't like Jose was hanging out inside with everybody else. There was a giant grill and a fire out on the street, and there was Jose Andres in the middle of New York City on like Little West 12th. I mean, look, whatever, like one of these super west side kind of tiny little streets. I mean, there was not a lot of vehicular traffic, and maybe part of the reason for that was because there was a little old barbecue, and Jose, roasting a pig out there. Jose Andres, World Central Kitchen. The guy is a hero. He starts up a nonprofit, World Central Kitchen, goes to Puerto Rico, feeds people. Fantastic. Met Eric Ripert. Eric Ripert runs and has for, I don't know, at least 25 years or more, Le Bernardin in New York City. Le Bernardin in New York City is now, and has been for the past 25 years, probably the best fish restaurant in America. I mean, the thing about Ripert is, and he's lovely. I mean, charming. He's lovely, and in a way, I suppose I'm kind of surprised, because to have that level of success for that amount of time, you would think that someone would be perhaps a little bit more intense, and he may very well be, but he's nice too. Ripert was great, and that restaurant is unbelievable. The Bernardin. Gail Simmons. The first time I met Gail Simmons, who is one of the judges there on Top Chef. But the first time I met Gail Simmons, she was working in the marketing department of Food and Wine magazine when they hired me to go do that video out in Aspen. But I know her now through that, and have met her many times, and have interviewed her, including on this very podcast. I mean, somewhere in the archives, you look up, All You Can Eat or whatever, and I got a 2-part series with Gail Simmons, charming, again, from Canada, lovely, good-looking, good personality, good person, Gail Simmons. Met very briefly Renee Redzepi from Noma, in its moment, the finest restaurant in the world. Alex Guarnaschelli, who you can see, Chef Alex, very regularly on the food. They now call it the Food Network. She's on one of those competition shows, but they're all competition shows. Met Duff Goldman more than one time. The cake guy, the cake maker, the cake baker, the also now on a show. A competition show. Kids competing to make donuts. I don't. For the life of me, I don't know what happened to the Food Network. I don't care. But at some point, this competition thing is going to be over, because it's silly already. Great food truck race. Freaking cake. Who gives a crap? The whole thing is fucking annoying to me. Met Rocco DiSpirito, blah, 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 blah. Harold McGee, there's an impressive guy, food scientist. Nobody knows more about the science of food than Harold McGee. If you want to know about how food interacts with, like, heat, how it changes, why things caramelize, I don't know, all that kind of stuff. Harold McGee's the man. Brilliant. Just got to look him up, find his book. Jean-Georges Vangerichten, I don't know, celebrity, not celebrity. Yeah, they would call him a celebrity chef. He's won all the awards. He's no one known. He's got restaurants around the world. Interviewed him for 10 minutes or so recently, last year. I think I put the segment here on one of the podcasts. And the thing I liked about it so much is Vangerichten was responsible, I would say, more than almost anybody else in the New York restaurant business, of introducing Asian kind of fusion cuisine, like bringing Asian ingredients to kind of French technique and American food. Terrific. And actually said exactly, when I asked him, about advice, said exactly the thing that I thought was exactly how I tell people I want to cook. He's like, the thing is, you want to keep it clean, you want to keep it pure. Don't complicate. Don't put too many flavors. That's the learning from him. Gary Vaynerchuk. Millions of people know Vaynerchuk, and he's lovely in the sense that I said at some point I was doing a panel. I was going to have some people that I would interview on stage in front of a crowd that would pay handsomely to come see them. And I said, do you want to come do it? I'm raising money for a children's hospital, and he agreed to do it. So I did a panel. I conducted a panel with Gary Vaynerchuk, serial entrepreneur, and just, followed by millions of people everywhere, and you can see him all the time, any place. Anyway, he was on the panel. I had Danny Meyer, the great restaurateur, on the panel, and Jacques Pepin. Interviewed the three of them, raised a whole bunch of money for the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, so thanks to Gary for that. Prince Albert of Monaco, he and I had lunch together because his mom, Princess Grace, was very friendly with Mary Wells Lawrence, who owned the advertising agency that I worked at the time in '85. Wells Rich Green, and I don't know, he was going to come into town for a week and work at the agency. They needed somebody about his age to take him out to lunch. Guess who? It was me. Me and Prince Albert out to lunch. That was fun. And finally, again, no order, but Morimoto, who you can see, one of the Iron Chefs. And the reason I know Morimoto is because one day, in the early days of Nobu downtown, I was able to walk over to Nobu from where my office was at the time, sit down at the sushi counter for lunch, and I ended up ordering sushi from a humorless sushi guy behind the counter who did not really start to pay attention to me until he could see that I knew what I was doing. And then it occurred to me, years later, because I don't forget a face, the guy serving me sushi piece by piece was Masaharu Morimoto, who became famous. Ladies and gentlemen, our time this evening has come abruptly to an end, which is an opportunity for me to remind you that you can find me next Wednesday at 7 o'clock doing the 10 herbs and spices that will change your life. Go to 92y.org and look that up if you want. Join me. You can pick up a copy of Short Order Dead. It's a good idea. And finally, I will remind you that life is short, so never waste a meal.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man.